Good evening. And remember, strap yourselves in.
Suck it up. It'll soon be over.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Richard Swada, Director of the Revelation Perth International Film Festival. Thank you for joining us for this fireside chat. We've got quite a few happening over the next few days. They're all online on our Vimeo channel and Facebook and YouTube channel. But today we have the great pleasure of speaking to Tommy Walker and Ross Hockrow, both directors of the excellent documentary Kaepernick in America, which is screening through the festival. When this film crossed our desk, we were very pleased with it, with the film. It's Rev has got a very strong reputation for social justice and working with films around the environment and politics and economics as well. So this film was really right in our zone. So thank you, fellas, for bringing the film to us. But and so over the next 20 minutes, we'll talk about the film and the background and your backgrounds as well. But perhaps one of you might want to give us a bit of a thumbnail of what the film is about, and then we can talk about how the film came to be. So yeah, I'm going to throw to you, Ross.
So basically, the film is broken up into it's the name kind of says it all. It's Kaepernick and America. So we like to say that the film is very much about America and how we reacted to Kaepernick, as much as it is about Kaepernick himself, if not more. So that's the gist of it, and it follows the career arc of Kaepernick right up until he takes the knee, and then shortly after, and then has kind of a snapshot of what was happening in 2016. I mean, that's really where the film lives. 2016, I think. A lot of people think of Kaepernick taking a knee and Trump being elected as these two separate things happening in totally different time periods, but they were happening at the exact same time. I think people kind of blocked it out because there's just a lot going on, or you need to compartmentalize. So, the fact that those two things are happening at the same time, that's how you get to the America part of the title. So,
and if I could just add to that, because I think Ross is exactly right, but we live in changing times as it relates to race and society, and in America we live in changing times that are changing and not changing. And one of the things that we wanted to bring to this project was that Ross and I are a pretty accurate kind of assessment of America, and having a black director and a white director involved in this project tells you a little bit about where America has come to, and the importance of having perspective on it from different sides is super important to what we're doing here. And so that's unique. A lot of people don't do that. It's either one or the other, and we're trying to let you know that this is actually about all of us in so many ways.
Just on the subject of taking a knee, for people that have been living under a rock and don't know what it is that we're talking about, maybe just explain what it is and how it came, how the action came to be.
So before every sporting event in America, they play the national anthem. When it started, I'm not actually sure. I think it was a baseball game in the 1900s, but anyway, I digress. And you go out, you take your hat off if you're a fan, you stand up, and everybody stands, and attention to the nearest flag, or depends on the sporting event. And there have been protests through the on the national anthem throughout the history of sports. It's not like a brand new thing. And Kaepernick was sitting down the first time this happened, and nobody really knew what was going on. Was he hurt? Was he not hurt? Is what's happening? No one really understands. Then he reveals he's not hurt and that he's not going to stand until, racial injustice is solved. Essentially, he does a pretty extensive interview where he explains the exact reason why he's not standing for the national anthem. Never mentions the flag or the anthem or anything like that, or anything that anybody in the media tried to make it. And then he and the film kind of goes into this, so I'm spoiling it if you want to see it. He meets a Green Beret who gives him the idea of kneeling, as it might be more respectful, because Kaepernick legitimately wanted to be respectful to people in the service. He didn't want to disrespect them. He just wanted to draw attention to an issue. And so him and this Green Beret came up with this idea to kneel, and that's how the gesture came to be. And he did it for 20 straight weeks.
And the other piece of it is that our we've been living this same story, those of us in society that are dealing with issues of race consistently and constantly. And how do we tell, if you're a filmmaker or a storyteller, how do you tell that story? What is the avenue and the vehicle for which you can actually drive down the road and tell the story to people that actually haven't heard it before, or aren't paying attention to it, or see it in news clips? How do we do that in the right kind of way? And so that for us is also an important element to all of this.
Well, that's an interesting point, and I'll stick with you for a second about the style of the film and the approach that you took to the structure of the work and that sort of thing. How did you conceptualize that, and were you thinking of other approaches and settled on this one? And but so how did the style come about in your approach?
I mean, I think we always wanted to be able to tell the story in a way that, like, the American audience could actually consume it, right, and take a look at it, and people are interested for sure in professional sports and in sports in general in America. And so how do we take that understanding and realization of what that is, and then combine it into what's happening in society, as to the reasons why he's actually making the choices that he's making in the moment that he's making them. So what happens in 2016, where are the police shootings that become of issue for him? Where are the things that are actually activating him as a social activist who happens to be an athlete as well at the same time? Like, all those things, I think, play into that role, and are important to how we tell the story, because that's something that sometimes what we do is we look at a situation that's kind of planted in issues of race or racism, and we look at it as a singular item, and then we move on from it, as opposed to actually realizing that there's a combination of these things that actually happen at the same time. What we wanted to do with our film was combine those situations so people could actually look at them in real time and say, wow, okay, now I understand more deeply why he made the choices that he made, and also take a look at who we are in society as well.
What do you think about that, Ross? Have you got anything to add to that with regard to the approach?
No, Tommy's exactly right. And the one thing I would add is, you got to make the information land. I mean, that's really kind of the goal here, especially in a story like this. And so, we focused on symbolism as a big theme in the film. It's not shy about that. The way it opens, it sort of announces that, hey, this is about symbolism. And the gesture of the knee is a symbol. Like, if anybody takes a knee during a American national anthem now, everybody associates it with the same thing, whether you agree with it or not. You have an association with it. And so, I'm probably, I don't know if I haven't been around long enough or whatever, but I can't remember a person who was living, who's the same age as me, basically, who became a symbol while they were still alive. And that, I don't think I've ever seen that before. And that's how information lands, because it's really what's behind a symbol is a story. And so I feel like, the idea of Kaepernick kind of, people say, oh, he never talks. He never says anything. Well, he doesn't have to say anything. He did the gesture, he kneeled, and then the narrative around him swelled. He doesn't have to say anything. He said everything he needed to say in that locker room interview after the first game, when he wasn't even kneeling yet. He was just sitting.
mm,
and there's nothing else to say after that. So, to me, it's like that symbol is gonna last, that's gonna last forever.
mm, mm.
And so it was about bringing that to life.
Yeah, it's interesting what you were saying just a second ago, Tommy, about all these little interconnected parts and connecting them in the movie, so you can the picture, like a puzzle, the picture slowly emerges, which is really fantastic to watch. And I think Australian audiences will really respond strongly to the film, because we have our own issues with First Nations, with our relationships with First Nations people here in the country, which are quite dramatic and a long time coming, I have to say, in addressing. But also, we're a very sporting nation here. We love sport, so I think there will be quite a good reaction to your picture. But just in terms of the development of the film, how long were you working on the concept and the idea and that sort of thing until it finally reaches the screen as it has now?
Well, I mean, we talked about this film. There's two producers that are, we look at ourselves as a team of creatives, and two act as the producers that helped activate us, and then Ross and I end up being the ones that help shape the creative, and Ross ends up editing it, which is an enormous piece of what this is. A tremendous job of editorial work that Ross piled into this, which is no small lift, to be sure. What I would say is that Bill Stepney and Gary Cohen and I, even before I'd met Ross, had these conversations around this documentary long before we actually really engaged in it. And the idea was a balancing act of like, well, can we actually make this film, and will somebody buy it? And this is ridiculous. Or Colin Kaepernick wasn't in the news anymore at that moment in time, and then Gary seized the reins and pulled us in right at pandemic, and that's when Ross and I really kind of got after it. But this is a conversation we've had for a long time, and I don't think the subject ever really changed much. I think things happened. George Floyd happened. Things happened that accelerated that, and there were more things happening in terms of like police killings and other things that were happening in society. And Colin Kaepernick was disappearing from the framework, so all that stuff kind of plays into it, I think, to a degree. And Ross, I mean, if I left anything out, but I think that was a lot of what we, how we kind of came at this.
Yeah, I mean, day one of the shutdown for the pandemic was day one of production.
That's right.
No. I guess it was kind of, I wouldn't say fortunate's the wrong sort of word, but with a documentary like yours, which is largely, it's not archival, has the connotations of like old and from the shelf, but largely news footage and that sort of thing. So I suppose it was kind of fortunate.
Yeah, I
in
mean,
ways.
sort of. I mean, no, we do it all remote now. Everything's remote. I'm doing 2 movies now. I have never been in the same room with anybody. But at the beginning of the pandemic, that was nobody had the infrastructure for that. So, it was a challenge. We were doing daily morning meetings. We didn't really need to do that, but we thought we did. We built an edit bubble where we all got tested and came into a house and edited for, a week or 2 or whatever. And, we were doing, which we did need to do. Yeah, that we did need to do. And so, we took the idea from the NBA, basically. I mean, we were just all making it up as we went along of like, how do we do this? How do we finish this?
Yeah.
Nobody knows what's going on, so, so it's, yeah.
Well, speaking of challenges, what were some of the things that what was the path of the movie like for you? Was it a challenging thing to do, or did people kind of look at what you were doing and go, just leave it alone? Was it a fairly open pathway for you where people were really backing you to make this picture because it was an important story to tell?
Well, it was just us, so there was no backing or permission or oversight. It was just us trying to figure out, like, we're gonna make this film. We've been talking about it for a while. The pandemic happened. There's no one's doing anything really, and we're gonna figure this out. And so, that's really how it happened.
But I would add that a lot of people, just general people that you talk to and that
Yeah.
and stuff, they wanted this film. They wanted to see this film.
I thought he meant like networks and stuff like that.
Well, it's both, though.
Really.
It is
Yeah.
both, right? Like it's like I think maybe to answer that question, like I've spent a lot of time doing social issue oriented documentaries, as has Ross. And one of the things is when you dive into that pool, you're always going to be encountered with some pushback from a certain perspective on what you're doing. And sometimes that involves who may or may not broadcast your film for whatever reasons that they do. And so when if you decide to jump from the high dive, hopefully the pool's deep enough,
Yeah, no, look, it's very true, and it's not unlike that here in Australia. And those high risk gambles, you want to hope that there's a net below you. But tell us a little bit about your relationship, the relationship between the two of you. Are you both longtime buddies and have worked together and had an understanding of each other's style and approach and all that sort of thing?
No, I think if this project hadn't happened, we may or may not have met before ever. We don't live in the same city. It is our relationship, it comes out of this project, and what I will tell you is that I've done collaborations in the past, and I continue to do collaborations. I'm a bit older than Ross is, and sometimes you have these wonderful collaborations, but more often you don't. And Ross and I have had a really from a creative standpoint, and from the standpoint of being able to kind of work with somebody on a project that is as heated and important as this one, we really work this in a way that I would never have imagined. Very kind of like seamless, and and I think we were able to build the best film we could because we built off of each other and one another, and which is what the true idea of collaboration is kind of really all about. And I'll let Ross talk about that as well.
No, I mean that's well said. Well said. Yeah, it was seamless. I mean, there was, like he said, it's like there's a lot of collaborations. You work with a lot of people, and you don't always get along with everybody. But this was about as easy as it gets, and I'm pretty certain it won't be the last one. And it was, especially this film specifically. You got to have a lot of really intense conversations around a lot of ideas. So it's a get to know you real fast, where you're at, what you stand for real quick. It's not a what's your favorite basketball team? Although we did that also. There's a fair amount of that. It was a lot of conversations that people have never had with their own parents. That's how this film got made. So
tell us about some of those conversations. Tell us about.
We can't do that. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, tell us about that.
I mean, there are a lot of conversations around race. Really open conversations around race. And it's. I mean, the film is sort of like.
How do we build off this subject in the right kind of way, or how do we tackle issues of we chose a path to go down that was oriented around showing people things that are not always easy for people to see and look at, and that's not an easy path. And how do we get to that decision? And so I'll go back to it. It wasn't just me and Ross. It was me, Ross, Gary, and Bill. So the four of us would talk through these things and come to a consensus in the right kind of way that we felt was right for us and right for the film, and important stuff to actually communicate.
Yeah, I mean, there are a fair amount of police killings in this film, and we had the raw footage to all of them, multiple angles, audio. I mean, first of all, as a filmmaker, you have to watch that stuff, 287 times to get to the scene that you have. So there's that part, and people get upset when they see it once, and so there's that. And then, we didn't just aimlessly put that stuff up there. A lot of thought went into, okay, here's this particular incident. What should we show? Why should we show it? How much should we show? And what is the audience takeaway supposed to be from showing this amount? Because, at a certain point it becomes gratuitous. At a certain point, it's, or you don't go far enough and you don't, this is not scripted. This stuff really happened. So you gotta, and people were, the country was kind of in turmoil for a little while. I mean, we can make the argument it still is. And so, and this is a big reason why, because this stuff happens. So
one of the things, we chose to do as a group was like, how do we take these moments if we're going to actually play them and figure out ways to memorialize the people that were lost? And we tried to do that in the film as well. Like, that's important to us, is that like, these are not just like salacious films to show. It's like, how do we show that this was a human being?
Yeah, there's a purpose to it all.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I think for, it's interesting because, we made this film, and, there's police killings that aren't in it that we had, that we saw footage for, and, we just can't have them all because there are a lot, and I think, there are going to be a fair amount of people that see this film and they're going to be seeing that stuff for the first time ever. And there are going to be people that see this film. They're going to be Americans that see this film and be like, yeah, I see it every day.
Yeah.
And, and I think there, one that stands out to me is Philando Castillo's in it, that particular killing. And I think, when we talked about that one specifically, we were in the bubble, right? That was the one where we were side by side talking about it. And the thing that I couldn't, that I felt like we needed to show is, look how fast this happened. He gets pulled over and it happens that quick. And it's, and I just think people, and it's an example of, it's happened a lot. And so I think that is, and at the end of the day, this is why Kaepernick took a knee, not because he's protesting America or the anthem, which if you watch certain news channels or read certain articles, that's what they'll have you think. And so, when you start to connect the dots properly, you get to see why things are the way they are, or happen the way they happen, I should say.
Yeah, look, it comes across very strongly in the film, and from an Australian perspective, watching that footage, like we have a problem with deaths in custody of First Nations people here as well. It's a problem, but watching the regularity of what happens, particularly in the United States, is just like it's almost incomprehensible from an Australian perspective. But you capture it so beautifully. The film just seems so in the moment all the time, and just as the intensity kind of ratchets up and the discussions go this way and that way through the media and other people and just general perspectives, it's really
and I would say, for especially for an Australian audience, but an American audience, all of us, it's once you hit 2016, this entire story happens over the course of an NFL season, which is not that long. 16 weeks. 16 weeks, all of this happened. Yeah. And that's another thing. We're not talking about, a 10-year timeline or an era or even an entire year. And so, when you start looking at it like that, it's like, it's a crazy time.
Yes, yes, very intense. But on that subject, in capturing the moment, so to speak, tell us about the editing process. So you edited it, Ross, but
I did.
guess, Tommy, you were like, you weren't in the same room. I don't imagine, but you know how
Not until we jumped in the bubble.
Yeah, we would talk every day, and I would, we go into every sort of sequence or whatever scene, doesn't matter. We would kind of talk it out. Like, here's
Ross is incredibly fast, and like fast. You can be fast at cutting a commercial that's somewhat laid out for you. This is not laid out. Ross would take a lot of information and cut sequences really quickly. So we could look at them and say, okay, this, and he cut them well. Like, we wouldn't necessarily have to noodle them that much, but that was a big part of it. It was like, the speed of being able to kind of cut and look, because there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. Like, we're tackling a lot of subject matter. How much football? How much social? Where do we draw the line? What's the balancing act of all that stuff?
calibration.
Exactly, and speed is really important to what this is, because if he couldn't cut this that fast, then we wouldn't be able to actually look at it and understand it and be able to kind of like go through it and say, okay, where do we go from here?
It's I remember seeing one of my favorite documentaries, Gimme Shelter, the Maysles brothers film, and they're talking to the Rolling Stones about, because the Rolling Stones are kind of curious about how a film emerges from all the stuff. And one of the Maysles says, well, a little island develops here, like a little story island develops here, and a little story island develops over here. And as the film progresses, it takes its shape in that kind of way in the editing room. Was that how it worked for you? Or did you guys just have okay, this is the direction of the film, this is the footage, bang, 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 bang? Or was it more of that kind of, okay, this story here and this story here, and slowly they come together for the picture?
I mean, this is me personally, and Tommy, correct me if I'm wrong, this is how we made this film. We knew the film we wanted to make before we started making it. We go into those interviews, not knowing the answers, but sort of, you research it, you do pre-interviews, you sort of know, and you discover things, but the large beats of the story. And one person we haven't mentioned is the guy who does all our archive on this, Matt McDonald. When he's on your team, you just assume that anything you want to do, he'll be able to find the stuff for it. So
Whatever
it's like
you
a
want,
cheat code.
Yeah.
So at that point, you're just, it doesn't, I don't want to use the word scripted because that's not correct, but there's a methodical plan that's being executed. And of course there are variations, and, George Floyd happened while we were making the film. So it's like, we didn't know that was going to happen. So, it's easier to take detours when you know where you're going.
That's why it's a journalistic adventure, because we're basically moving as we go, with the idea that something could happen in the middle of all of what we're doing. And so you have to be ready to like adjust and move as quickly as that happens.
Well, tell us in that vein, just getting into your backstories. How did you both come together with the film? And maybe just tell us a little bit about your creative backgrounds. Tommy, I'll start with you. You're on screen.
So I'm a little older than Ross. I started out working at National Geographic in 1985. I spent a couple of years there. Spent a couple of years in LA working on commercials and music videos. Paula Abdul, Straight Up, and Bobby Brown, My Prerogative, and LL going back to Cali, did some of that stuff. And then I did a couple conflict zone documentary films about refugees, child soldiers, and war, essentially, in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and then a film about refugees that fled Sudan called God Grew Tired of Us, which ended up being a National Geographic film and a theatrical release. So I've always kind of played in that space, in the kind of social issue oriented space, and I've always wanted to do that, and just kind of continued down that road. So I shoot and work on commercials, and I shoot and work my passion is documentaries and telling these kinds of stories. And I think Ross has a similar story as well.
Ross.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the same kind of journey.
I'm a little older. I'm a little older. I'm a little older.
Yeah, I actually used to be a professional poker player, and then I stopped, took my money, and started making movies as a means to try to learn how to make movies. Ran out of money because making movies is way more expensive than I thought it would be. And then I did commercial filmmaking for a little while, got into documentaries. Always, my sort of brand is sports or social issue. And so, of course, Kaepernick is kind of the ultimate crossover of the two things. So, and the way we kind of came together on this is through one of our producers, Gary, who kind of brought us together and said, you guys would be great doing this together. And so, and
I've known Gary for 30 plus years.
Right. And I'm 36, just to give you the math on that.
Yes. Look, both of those prehistories are worthy of a interview in its own right. Like professional poker player, what? The working in combat and front lines, so to speak, social front lines. Very interesting for me personally, but very interesting for the festival itself. But look, we might have to wind it up here, fellas. But look, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the film. I think Australian audiences, as I said, will respond to it very well, because although we don't necessarily have the intensity of deaths in custody that happens in the United States, we do have them, and they're not spoken about anywhere nearly enough. And certainly the race issue in Australia is it's underpinning and should underpin the social discussions that we have and the creative discussions as well. So it's a very important film for us, and seeing these connections internationally and these issues internationally are the same is very important for everyone here in this country. So thank you so much for the film. Oh, I meant to ask you, I've wound up and now I've got another question. Just the life of the film internationally, it seems to be going incredibly well for you. Is that the case for the picture?
I think we might get more response from actually outside the country than inside the country. Partly because people know that these things are happening within our country, and they're interested in them, and like we talked about before, the challenges that we have here are real challenges. And so maybe we can actually land ground outside. What I was going to say to add to what you're saying is that I've spent time I've been to Melbourne, and I've been to Sydney, and I've spent time there. And the issues that we're talking about in this film they're not unique to America. They might be American in this film, but the subjects and the issues that you just actually touched on are issues that are global. And they will continue to be global. And so people, when they see this film, will have a connective piece to relate to, whether they're in Australia or the UK or South Africa or Italy or Ireland. It doesn't really matter. They will have similar kinds of issues that they're dealing with on that front as well. So I think it's right for us to actually explore the global experience, because I think the story works everywhere.
I agree with that. Ross, final word.
I hope you guys enjoy it. I mean, that's and learn about it. And to end it on a lighter note, because the film is heavy. How much football, American football, needs to be explained for them to follow what's going on?
Oh, look, I don't think any amount of explaining will allow Australians to understand that game. But it's spectacular to watch.
Are they mad we call it football?
Oh, look, Australians they love football. We have like about 3 codes of football here. Australian rules is what you might have seen in Melbourne, Tommy, which is kind of a national game, rugby league and rugby union and soccer as well. So Australians just love sport. Even if they don't understand it or don't get it, they just love to watch it. So there will be there will be a high recognition of the nature of the sport and the community around the sport. So
Yeah,
in
America we always say that everybody loves football, they just don't know it yet.
Yes,
we're good.
That's very true. That's very true. And on that note, thank you so much, fellas, for being part of the festival. Thank you for the film. Thank you for the talk, and really all the best with the film. And I hope it really works for you internationally, which it seems to be doing. So congratulations. Yeah.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Richard.
Thanks for having us.
A real pleasure.
Really, thank you.
It's a pleasure.